The day after Robert Kennedy died, I received a notice from the local Railway Express office saying my Walther P-38 automatic pistol had arrived. We shot it one afternoon, agreeing that it had a very smooth action, and then I sent it back. Returning the P-38 solved nothing. It only postponed the necessity of coming to grips with my gun problem.
Hunter saw guns as one of the great things in life. He loved shooting them and firing them whenever he could. When he was a big sir, he would go wild boar or wild pig hunting with a submachine gun.
I had a BB gun when I was like 7, probably. Those are some of my best memories from that time because it was something we both enjoyed doing, but it was also because it was time we were building our relationship as a father and son and not just as kind of roommates.
The guns, they weren't just for you. He liked the noise and the violence and the destruction of it. You know, and then he had that in his personal life, too. He had a real violent streak.
The first time he took acid, Hunter says, "Sandy, get me the gun." I said, "Well, I can't get you the gun. I'm terrified something is going to happen to Juan." And Hunter says, "You get me that gun, or I am throwing this boot through the window." He throws the boot through the window.
Had my brain turned to jelly from too much acid? What was I doing with all these guns? My angst began to fester as the gun control argument raged closer to home. More and more people began telling each other that the gun was the ultimate cure for what ails us, the American way.
By 1968, Hunter takes on this idea that he's going to be able to write on the death of the American dream. And Hunter thought that covering politics, 68 was going to be the book.
I went to Chicago as a journalist. My candidate had been murdered in Los Angeles 2 months earlier.
Hunter was in Chicago, right in the midst of the gas and the beatings and everything else. And I think that that was a milestone event for Hunter that he never got over. And he never forgave Humphrey, who was the candidate, and he never forgave Muskie, who was the vice presidential candidate, for supporting Mayor Daley and his Chicago police.
I witnessed at least 10 beatings in Chicago that were worse than anything I ever saw the Hells Angels do. I left in a state of hysterical angst, convinced by what I'd seen that the American dream was clubbing itself to death.
There were only tears twice that I remember ever in our 19 years together. Well, I remember one when he came back from the Democratic convention, and he was telling me the stories about the people being beaten, and he just, you know, the tears just, and that was very, you know, it was, Hunter was a man that didn't cry. I mean, he cared so much. Hunter was a patriot. I mean, he knew the Constitution, he cared about it. And then there he was in Chicago, and it's all being destroyed. I think Chicago inspired him to do more, to get more involved.
Right away, right after we started, Chicago, 68 took place. And that was kind of a radicalizing, galvanizing event. We were already eschewing mainstream establishment politics, saying, look, the system is too rigged. Politics is fine, but in some other venue. I got a letter from him out of the blue, just complimenting me on Rolling Stone and how much he liked it. So I wrote him back and said, what are you doing these days? You know, I'd love to have you in a magazine. And then he said, intentionally he was running for sheriff. So I wrote and said, how about that? Sounds great. It's the kind of thing we would run today. You know, somebody running for sheriff in Aspen trying to take over the town.
Hunter Thompson is a moralist posing as an immoralist. Nixon is an immoralist disguised as a moralist. This is James Salter. There'll be thieves and autorecs in Aspen, whoever gets elected. But Hunter represents something wholly alien to the other candidates for sheriff. Ideas. and a sympathy towards the young, generous, grass-oriented society, which is making the only serious effort to face the technological nightmare we have created. The only thing against him is he's a visionary. He wants too pure a world.
First of all, he drove everybody batshit nuts. Hunter was my friend and neighbor, the man who never paid his rent, broke up my marriage, and taught my children to smoke dope. Now, Hunter was outrageous, but there was such a sort of movement that this guy may be crazy, but better that than Whitmire.
The American sheriff's job was carved out of the rugged West. It was a desperately needed position of few words, much action, and little praise or glory. Today, the sheriff has reams of responsibilities, but still, as in the past, the #1 responsibility is to protect his people and enforce their laws. Vote for and elect Carol Whitmire for our sheriff.
I think a lot of places are beyond this kind of politics. We seem to be running an experiment that people are watching.
Hunter came to Aspen. He had moved into our farm. Hunter liked to talk politics. I was just at that age of war protests, 1968, that I was becoming political. And so Hunter and I had a lot in common to talk about.
Well, Aspen then was a magnet for intellectuals who wanted to drop out. And Hunter convinced us that we didn't have much effect on what happened in Washington day to day, and what happened in Washington from day to day didn't have much effect on us. But what happened in Pitkin County had a visceral, daily, hourly effect on the way we lived here. People didn't understand that Aspen was a battleground. Aspen was more of a Disneyland. Hunter was a visionary. He understood more about land use and development than any of us did. Nobody at the time was standing up to the bulldozers.
Tentative platform, Thompson for sheriff, Aspen, Colorado, 1970. 1. Rip up all city streets with jackhammers and sod the streets at once. 2. Change the name Aspen to Fat City. This would prevent greedheads, land rapers, and other human jackals from capitalizing on the name Aspen. These swine should be fucked, broken, and driven across the land. 3. It will be the general philosophy of the sheriff's office that no drug worth taking should be sold for money. My first act as sheriff will be to install on the courthouse lawn a set of stocks in order to punish dishonest dope dealers in a proper public fashion.
I was only about 6 at the time, but legend has it that my father shaved his head so he could say, unlike my long-haired opponent, Sheriff Whitmire.
I just wish I could have been old enough to really understand people's reaction that this crazy, bald, freak drug fiend was about to take over the whole political mechanism.
Holly came from Miami, FLA.
Hunter Thompson is the only candidate who has the imagination and intelligence to be a law enforcement executive. Elect Hunter Thompson sheriff.
You haven't been listening. Why doesn't anybody listen to me anymore? This is for your own good.
Hey, honey, take a walk on the wild side.
At the start, I think it was more to get a message out knowing that defeat was certain. The serious component of Hunter's campaign snowballed, and as the movement gained momentum, I think Hunter actually believed that he had a chance. And a lot of us that were supporting Hunter shared that belief.
We're trying to get together a list of endorsement for Hunter Thompson for sheriff.
We were all freaks, the people who came together in support of Hunter. But I think our biggest issue at the time was the environment, and a secondary issue was the illegal status of drugs.
What is that?
This is what I believe to be marijuana.
You can't tell?
An awful lot of us were smoking dope. Because the government said thou shalt not, we said we shall.
Marijuana laws are one of the reasons that has engendered this lack of respect that that cops complain about all over the country. When you get a whole generation that grows up as felons